What if, starting tomorrow, all fossil fuels simply vanished? No coal, no oil, no natural gas. How would the world adapt? Would we find a way to power our lives, or would society collapse under the weight of this sudden energy crisis? Let's dive into the immediate and long-term impacts of a world without fossil fuels. Maybe, just maybe, sleep isn't something we should take for granted. In a way, it forces us to rest, reflect, and reset, a natural balance in a world that could otherwise spiral out of control. Maybe sleep is a gift, after all. Fossil fuels power roughly 80% of the world's energy needs. They run our cars, heat our homes, and drive industries. If fossil fuels disappeared overnight, the first thing you'd notice is the silence. Cars, planes, trains, most would be immobilized. Transportation would grind to a halt, leaving billions of people stranded. Shipping of goods. Forget it. Global supply chains, which rely heavily on trucks, ships, and planes running on fossil fuels, would collapse. Supermarket shelves would quickly empty, and the price of goods would skyrocket. But it's not just transportation. Our power grids are heavily dependent on fossil fuels, particularly in countries that rely on coal and natural gas for electricity. Overnight, the lights would go out for much of the world. Blackouts would sweep across cities, leaving millions without power. Hospitals, water treatment plants, communication networks, all would be at risk. The impact on industry would be catastrophic. Factories that produce everything from food to electronics would shut down. The global economy would face an unprecedented crisis. Unemployment would surge as millions of jobs tied to the fossil fuel industry and the industries that depend on it vanish. The financial markets would plummet, throwing the world into economic turmoil. But not everything would be doom and gloom. This abrupt shift would force humanity to accelerate the transition to renewable energy. Solar, wind, hydro, and nuclear power would need to ramp up overnight. However, these energy sources have their own challenges. Solar and wind are intermittent. They depend on the sun shining and the wind blowing. Storage technologies like batteries would need to massively scale up, and fast. Countries with existing renewable energy infrastructures like Iceland, which relies almost entirely on geothermal and hydroelectric power, would be the most prepared. But many other nations, especially those heavily reliant on coal and oil, would struggle to keep the lights on. The disparity between rich and poor countries would grow, as wealthier nations with access to advanced technologies could adapt more quickly. This crisis would also change the way we live on a personal level. Without fossil fuels, we'd have to rethink how we commute, how we heat our homes, and how we eat. Electric cars, bikes, and public transportation powered by renewable energy would become the norm. Homes would need to rely on solar panels, heat pumps, and more energy-efficient designs to stay warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Food production would also be impacted. Modern agriculture is heavily reliant on fossil fuels for machinery, fertilizers, and transportation. With no fossil fuels, traditional farming methods might make a comeback. Manual labor, horse-drawn plows, and organic fertilizers. Vertical farming, urban gardening, and plant-based diets could rise as we adapt to a new reality.
But there's one silver lining: the environment. Fossil fuels are responsible for the majority of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. If they disappeared tomorrow, the immediate drop in pollution would be staggering. The air would clear, smog-filled cities would see blue skies, and carbon emissions would plummet. Climate change, while still a long-term issue, would slow dramatically. However, even this comes with a cost. Renewable energy infrastructure requires metals like lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements, which have their own environmental and ethical challenges. Mining these resources at a rapid pace could create new environmental problems, from deforestation to water contamination. And without careful management, we might simply replace one set of problems with another. So, what would the world look like after the dust settles? In the short term, the transition would be chaotic, with mass blackouts, transportation breakdowns, and food shortages. But in the long term, humanity might emerge more resilient, with a cleaner, more sustainable energy system. Cities might be quieter, the air cleaner, and our reliance on destructive energy sources diminished. The sudden disappearance of fossil fuels would be one of the greatest challenges humanity has ever faced, but it might also be the wake-up call we need to innovate, cooperate, and finally break free from our reliance on fossil fuels. We'd be forced to change how we live, how we work, and how we power the world. In the end, the loss of fossil fuels could be both a disaster and an opportunity. The question is, would we rise to the challenge? Or would we let the world slip into chaos? One thing is certain, the disappearance of fossil fuels would forever change the course of human history. What would you do in a world without fossil fuels?